Coming up on this edition of Reel to Reel.
People could see clearly that God's hand was not in this, that this was an evil action.
The tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut, 1 year later.
I'm Steve Kiltonic. I'll have the story of a Holyoke hero, a Franciscan chaplain who gave the ultimate sacrifice for God, honor, and the fatherland.
And the head of the Archdiocese of the military and his ministry to the men and women of our armed forces. These stories and more are just ahead on this edition of Reel to Reel.
From throughout Western New England and beyond, this is Reel to Reel, your window on the world around you. Here is your Reel to Reel host, Sharon Roulier.
Hello and welcome to Reel to Reel. It's been almost a year since the tragedy in Newtown where 20 first graders and 6 educators were gunned down at Sandy Hook Elementary School. The pain and suffering of the victims' families is unimaginable. Tonight we take you to this small Connecticut town for the first of 2 reports as we hear from the pastor of St. Rose of Lima Parish in Newtown, where 8 of the young victims were members. Recently, Carolee McGrath sat down with Monsignor Robert Weiss to learn how faith has helped people pull through, as well as see a remarkable image that a parishioner captured that very day, which has brought comfort to all who see it.
I'm joined by Monsignor Robert Weiss, who's the pastor of St. Rose of Lima Church, although everybody calls you Father Bob, and Mike Capola, who has 3 kids at St. Rose of Lima School. You're also the facilities chair for the school as well. And you both were here the day of the shooting. In the last year, how have you managed to bring your parish community, through it all?
I think from the very beginning, we addressed the issue as it was, and very quickly people relied on their faith. And certainly for the majority of this community, which is very faith-based, people found great consolation and strength in their faith. And I remember clearly just being with those families in that firehouse that day, not one of them saying, why is God doing this? They clearly discerned this as evil. And that was a very important reality for all of us, that people could see clearly that God's hand was not in this, that this was an evil action that just destroyed the lives of so many innocent young people. And very quickly, kind of the mantra of our community became, darkness and evil visited us, but light has overcome it.
I know you had 8 children here that were parishioners here. And, I just think about those families every single day that, as we're all carrying on with our lives, they have that incredible cross and pain.
Absolutely. And, some of them are back. Some of them, and I understand this, find it possible to walk into this church. How do you walk down that aisle where your child was brought in? I mean, how do you do that? And, whatever the music is played, it just brings back those kinds of things. But nevertheless, all those families have their children back, and their siblings are back in religious education. They are very active, some of them in the parish. We've been in touch with the families. We're giving them the space that they need. They know that we're here for us. But their grief, of course, is just unimaginable. And they're dealing with it in very, very different ways. As you know, many of the families became very politicized very quickly. Some of them found consolation in that. Others have just become very quiet and almost disappeared in the community. So everybody's reacting very differently, and as time is going on, I believe it's becoming even more and more difficult for them, even though many of them have established foundations in honor of their children and putting their energies there. But it's still a very, very difficult and painful time for everybody. I remember every weekend for a while I was bringing out one of the gifts that we were given, and you could just see the emotion in the church. We were given a set of handbells, and people were coming up and almost afraid to touch them. Just the reverence for life has just become so important here, and so that it elicits a lot of emotionality, a lot of emotion from everybody.
Well, Mike, you have a very special story to share. that I had learned about and was so happy to hear it, although it didn't get a lot of media attention. Tell us about that. I know you were here the morning of December 14th.
We were here in church. Monsignor got the call.
Why were you here in church? It was daily mass for the
Friday
students?
Mass.
It was Friday Mass for the students.
School
okay.
Mass. And he came running in. He wasn't serving the Mass. And we had found out that there was a shooting. And he said it was serious. We're on lockdown. Stay in the church. I just didn't feel that I was going to do any good being in the church. I wanted to be outside. And I went outside, and everybody was on lockdown, the school, the church. We ran back, him and I had run back up to preschool. We had to make sure that they were okay. He came back into the church, and I stayed up there because I could kind of see at the top of the campus. And then I kept getting phone calls from friends of mine saying that there were shooters in the school behind us, and they were just getting misinformation. And I started getting worried. There were no cops here. They were going down to Sandy Hook, and I could just hear them keep passing here and passing here, and I didn't know what to do if somebody came out after our school or whatever, because now it started to, become so real to me. And I looked up and I saw the cross up in the sky, in the clouds.
Did you share this with other, media outlets? Was it something that had been talked about before, or?
We did, but we didn't see it out there like we thought it would be. It was shocking, because I think for here it was comforting for a lot of people. And anyone that has seen the cross and saw the picture, and they know that I took it, that it wasn't photoshopped or anything like that, I think it brought a big comfort to them, right?
Absolutely. Through this image of a cross, and you can read what you want into it, but I think all of us read into the fact that God is near to us. Initially I saw it as a sign of protection, but as time went on, we had a visionary here from Medjugorje who spoke, and as I was listening to him speak, I realized that there was also a burden that had been laid on this community to continue to witness to faith. A cross was laid on the shoulders of this town, and what were we going to do with that? Were we going to just let it hang there, or were we going to do like Jesus did? He died on the cross, but then he rose.
When you had come to our church, you mentioned, when is this going to stop? And I remember thinking very clearly in my head, uh-oh, he's winding up. It's going to be a big political speech, just because I thought, where's he going with this? Not that I didn't trust you, but your response was just so incredible. Do you remember what you said?
Sure. To me, I was getting to the point where I didn't know what was safe for people anymore. That's really what was getting to me, that where is safe for people? Home invasions, and now a school tragedy. Churches. There was just a minister killed recently in a church. What is safe for people? And, you get to that point of almost, kind of despairing, like, where is all this taking it? But I have to see this as a really pro-life message, that we need to embrace life. And all of this legislation, all of these laws, until we all change our hearts and get back to a basic respect for human dignity, it is not going to stop.
What do you want people to do a year later for you? What can we do as Catholics at home who are watching this?
Let's just get back to what we're supposed to be. Our community and honoring the first anniversary is not going to have a town-wide observance. We're asking people to do kindnesses within their own community in the name of these victims. Let's get back to where we live, and let's make a difference where we live. And whether it's here in Newtown or whether it's in Southbury or anywhere in this world, let's get back to what God called us to be. I realize that we've had a lot of issues in our church, and it has driven many, many people away. But even our new bishop is saying, let's just go one by one. Let's reach out to one person at a time and take their hand and bring them back.
Father Bob, thank you so much for joining us, Monsignor Weiss and Mike Capola, and sharing all of that with us. And we're going to be praying for you. God bless you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And joining me now is Carolee McGrath. Carolee, despite their own pain and heartache over the loss of these precious children in their community, Monsignor Weiss and Mike both felt strongly about sharing the faith aspect of this tragedy and sharing the untold story of the cross in the clouds. Why?
Well, Monsignor Weiss has been invited to speak all across the country, and I could tell you personally, when he and Mike visited my parish, St. Cecilia's Parish, back in March when we held our concert for Newtown, and he shared that cross in the clouds. I mean, there was a hush over the hundreds of people that were in our church. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. And I think people really felt that there was this hope, and that, you know, when you ask the question, where was God? Well, you see that cross in the clouds, and you understand what Monsignor Weiss said in our interview, that evil did visit us, but light has overcome it. And I think that cross represents that God is bigger than this horrendous evil act.
Carolee, next week in your second part, you'll have more on this story. What can we expect?
Next week, we'll be talking with some of the members of the St. Rose of Lima youth group, a few of the teenagers who are involved there. They have more than 100 kids in their youth group. They are extremely close to our Lord, and they have inspiring stories of how they have gotten through this last year as, you know, teenagers dealing with all of these things and all of these issues in their own town and losing people that they know closely. So they're going to share with us how Jesus has really sustained them and brought them through the last year.
Okay, Carolee, thanks so much for sharing this story with us today. And still to come on Reel to Reel, the head of the Archdiocese of the Military and his ministry to those in the armed services, and a Franciscan chaplain's heroic D-Day story. These stories and more are still to come on this edition of Reel to Reel.
The Chalice of Salvation, your weekly spiritual connection. I'm Pastor Father Terence Scanlon, your Chalice host, inviting you to join us this Sunday morning at 10. Join us this week as we welcome Bishop Timothy McDonald and celebrate the 30th anniversary of the diaconate program here in our diocese. The Chalice of Salvation, your spiritual connection, Sunday morning at 10 here on 22 News.
In this state, there are no extras, no fluff, no frills, no free lunch, no second helpings, no streets paved with gold, no promise, no certainty. In this state, life is a bitter struggle to survive with the least. It's home to 1 out of every 11 families in America. It's home to 1 out of every 6 children in America. It's home to more than 32 million people. It's the state of American poverty. And if you were poor, you'd be home by now.
If you have lived in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, or Vermont anytime during the last 130 years, chances are you have been blessed by the ministry of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Springfield. In classrooms, churches, homes, prisons, hospitals, food pantries, women's shelters, and anywhere else they saw a need, the sisters have continued to seek out and serve the dear neighbor and to bring the great love of God to people of all faiths or no faith at all stages of life. Now, when the sisters are facing a financial crisis, we at Catholic Communications want to help them ensure the continuing care of retired sisters. As they begin their capital campaign with a special parish collection this weekend, we are presenting a special November issue of the Catholic Mirror dedicated to our local Sisters of St. Joseph. The cover story features a brief history of the congregation and an interview with its current president, Sister Maxine Schneider. And nothing illustrates the accomplishments of the sisters better than the comments of donors who have already responded to their plight. Special feature stories profile sisters serving as pastoral ministers and high school teachers in a local jail and at the Ronald McDonald House in Springfield. and a retired teacher who is off to mission in Africa, along with the retired president of Elms College. The final year of faith profile outlines the history of the Newman Catholic Center at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, which recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. Our tribute to the Sisters of St. Joseph of Springfield begins with the words of Bishop Timothy McDonnell, whose appreciation and support of the sisters has been unwavering since his arrival in 2004. So, in this month of Thanksgiving, we offer our gratitude to the sisters, whose presence continues to unite neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God. At the editor's desk, I'm Rebecca Drake.
And just a reminder that the diocesan singing priests will hold a benefit concert for the Sisters of St. Joseph on Sunday, November 24th at 3 p.m. at Bellamy School in Chicopee. To purchase tickets, you can call Mount Marie at 536-0853. And a group seeking support from our Catholic community is the Archdiocese for the Military Services. Created by Pope John Paul II in 1985 to provide the Catholic Church's full range of pastoral ministries and spiritual services to those in the United States Armed Forces, it receives no formal funding. Archbishop Timothy Broglia has been head for Archdiocese of Military Services since 2007. He visited our diocese a year ago, and Peggy Weber had the chance to sit down with him.
Archbishop Timothy Broglia has by far the youngest and largest geographic archdiocese in the United States. The borders of his flock stretch all over the world. Archbishop Broglia shepherds a lot of people, including many young service people.
We're almost in a certain sense caretakers, but we really serve people who come from somewhere into our going somewhere. But during the time that they are in the military or that they're in a VA hospital, we try to offer them the best pastoral care we can.
The Archbishop, whose headquarters are in Washington, D.C., says they serve about 1.8 million people worldwide. This includes military families, embassy personnel, and government contractors working abroad.
My biggest challenge is getting priests to serve on active duty in the military.
He says there are 250 active duty priests who are aided by priests in the reserve, such as Fathers Jeffrey Ballou and James Lange, who serve as chaplains at Westover Air Force Base. Archbishop Broglia is not a member of the military, but he has spent his holidays and other times visiting the troops.
It's something that's always appreciated. The soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guardsmen always appreciate the fact that someone takes that opportunity to spend some time with them at a time when they can't be with their families. And so in a certain sense, it's an understanding of the wider family of faith.
The Archbishop says that most of the people in his flock are young, very young, and many have served in combat areas.
The experience of being in combat does ask an individual, what are the fundamental values in my life? What is it that I'm looking for? What is my relationship with Almighty God? And I think it's important to have someone there to help him or her in those moments respond to those questions, to guide them.
He says that chaplains try to minister to the many needs of a very diverse flock. He acknowledged that suicide is a tremendous concern in the military. He says it is caused usually by economic difficulties or relationship problems. The chaplains try to alleviate these concerns.
They try to educate people. They try to remind them that no matter how grave the situation is, there can always be a solution.
Archbishop Broglia says that everyone can play a part in the work of his archdiocese, especially by praying for the men and women in the service. He also says that we should have an open heart and a listening ear for all of them.
When someone returns from a deployment, let that person tell his or her story. Look about and see if there's some way that you can help them with your expertise.
A comforting presence can make a difference, and that is what Archbishop Broglia and his chaplains try to provide.
I remember once my very early experience going to the Veterans Hospital in Washington and being taken to a room of a big strapping Marine who was so affected by PTSD that he couldn't talk. He just held my hand, and I tried to comfort him, not knowing really how much was getting through.
Archbishop Roulier says that in his ministry, his visits with the troops truly stand out.
One of the most moving moments was washing the feet of soldiers in Iraq, in Baghdad, in 2009. Certainly it's a ritual gesture, but it was really serving those that I'm called to serve in a very concrete way.
And he notes that the men of the cloth, who are often clothed in camouflage and military gear, are at the core of his archdiocese.
Our chaplains are generous, talented, and stretched to the limits of their capabilities.
And he appreciates their flock, which is scattered all around the world.
For me, the most moving thing has been the people I'm privileged to serve. They are men and women dedicated to their country, they're dedicated to their service, and they're dedicated to each other.
And Archbishop Roulier says that his archdiocese has an annual budget of $5.1 million that is funded primarily by donations. It is, he notes, worth every penny to help those who protect our freedom. For Reel to Reel, I'm Peggy Weber.
And next weekend, a collection will be taken up in all parishes for the military archdiocese. We thank all who serve our nation. And our final story today highlights one of the most famous dates in military history, D-Day, June 6, 1944. One paratrooper who took part in this epic battle was a Holyoke native and Franciscan chaplain. Steve Kiltonick now has more on the heroic life story of Father Ignatius Maternowski.
D-Day, June 6, 1944. Allied forces land on the beaches of Normandy, France, and begin the long march to Germany. It was to be the turning point of World War II and the beginning of the end for Hitler and the Nazis. In the early morning hours of that fateful day, American paratroopers jumped into the dark of night and land behind enemy lines. One of the paratroopers was Father Ignatius Maternowski, who served as chaplain of the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment. According to Father James McCurry, Maternowski grew up in Holyoke, the proud son of Polish immigrants. His family worshipped at Mater Dolorosa Parish, and Francis, his baptismal name, was a star basketball player at Mater Dolorosa School and later at St. Francis High in Athol Springs, New York, which he attended to become a priest.
He had an innocence about him. We would call it a humility, a holiness. Humanly speaking, he had a bit of a naivete about him that many noticed. He was also a gifted preacher.
As a seminarian, Maternowski returned to St. Hyacinth in Granby before being ordained to the priesthood in 1938 by Springfield Bishop Thomas O'Leary. But when war broke out, Maternowski was one of the first Franciscans to volunteer to become a military chaplain.
He was inspired by the patriotism of the fatherland, for God and fatherland was a very common phrase used by the Polish immigrants here in Holyoke. So with that sense of Polish patriotism and American patriotism and zeal for souls, he didn't really hesitate a minute.
Father Maternowski enlisted in 1942 and did his basic training in the U.S., attaining the rank of captain. In 1943, he was deployed to England to train for the invasion of Europe. Before dawn broke on June 6, 1944, Father Maternowski parachuted with his troops into the hamlet of Gertville in the town of Peekleville. An American glider crashed nearby, and there were many casualties. Father Ignatius, who landed safely, began to minister to the injured and dead paratroopers. He set up a safe house for the wounded in a cafe grocery shop.
He also noted that there were some wounded Nazi German soldiers, and here's the Franciscan idealism of the man, the peacemaker. He had this inspired notion, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could set up one common medical facility for the wounded of both sides, and in his own way try to make peace and reconciliation. So he took off his helmet, fastened it to his waistband. He left his gun behind, made sure that his Red Cross band was around his arm, and his chaplain's cross was on his collar.
Father Maternowski walked down the street and met up with the chief German medic, a Nazi major. After conversing, he showed him the wounded Americans.
Shortly after he turned around and started walking back, he was hit by Nazi sniper fire and shot dead. He fell against a wall, and that wall is his death site where his body would lay for 3 more days before the Nazis allowed the Americans to remove it. Who shot the gun? We don't know.
Soldiers from the 90th Infantry Division retrieved Father Maternowski's body and buried him near Utah Beach. Maternowski, who received the Purple Heart, was the only U.S. chaplain to be killed on D-Day and the only Franciscan chaplain to die in the war. He was 32. In 1948, Maternowski's remains were returned and his body was given a proper burial in Mater Dolorosa Cemetery. Today, Father Maternowski is remembered at Arlington National Cemetery on the Chaplain's Hill Monument. In France, by a special monument in the town and site where he was shot. In Granby, where he attended St. Hyacinth, he is honored with a plaque honoring all Franciscans. Across from the former Mater Dolorosa Church is Kosciuszko Park. Father Maternowski is at the top of the Veterans Monument list. Father Maternowski's date of death was originally reported as June 13th because it took 7 days to claim and then bury his body. On November 3rd, a memorial service was held here at Mater Dolorosa Cemetery to honor Father Maternowski. During the ceremony, Father McCurry dedicated a new monument on which was etched, after a nearly 70-year wait, the actual day of death, June 6, 1944, D-Day.
Let us pray. O God, by whose mercy the faithful departed find rest, bless this gravestone.
At the memorial, a large crowd, including many veterans, gathered to hear Father McCurry tell Father Maternowski's life story. After Father McCurry unveiled the new monument and then blessed it, Polish hymns were sung. And wreaths were placed on each side of the headstone.
In the Franciscan Book of Memories, it is written of Father Ignatius. He was an exemplary priest, a dynamic preacher, but most of all, he was truly an apostle and friend of the soldiers entrusted to his spiritual care. May he rest in peace. God bless America.
For Reel to Reel, I'm Steve Kiltonick.
Father Maternowski's story is just one of the many of the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation. And we join in remembering them on this Veterans Day weekend. And for this week, that's Reel to Reel. Remember, for all of the latest news on the church in Western Massachusetts and around the globe, we have continuous updates on our website, iobserve.org. There you can view stories and entire episodes of this program, as well as read news reports from the acclaimed Catholic News Service. That's iobserve.org. And please join me at this same time next week for another edition of Reel to Reel, your window on the world around you. Have a wonderful week.